conjure anything there. I just love food with a passion that only deepens with time. So, but my superpower is, I know there are probably smarter ones to pick, maybe cooler ones or ones that would do more things. But when I watched the movie The Incredibles, I knew immediately that Elastigirl was what I wanted to be. And I love how, so I have 4 children, 4 sons who are the most accident-prone people you can imagine. And that when I saw her like stretch her body to become a parachute to save them all, and like shoot out her limbs to grab them from like the flaming jet, I was like, yes, yes, that's what I want. I want the ability to stretch to encompass and surround my 4 boys and, you know, protect them. So I'm that horrible mother that is like neurotic. You didn't need to know that. Buy my book. That's
Can you guys start by giving a brief overview of your work and your most recent books?
Okay. So, Lovely War is my latest YA novel, and it is, I describe it as an epic, mythic, World War I ragtime love story. And that's a lot going on, and it is big, and it will hurt if you drop it on your feet. But it is primarily 2 love stories set during World War I, as told by a group of Greek gods from a Manhattan hotel room in 1942. So these gods are gathered at the height of World War II, and they're telling these 2 stories set during World War I. The reason they're gathered is I actually took a scene right out of the Odyssey of Homer, where Hephaestus, the jealous husband of Aphrodite, the beautiful goddess of love, he is sick and tired of his wife stepping out with Ares, who actually happens to be his brother, just to make things worse. And so he fashions a cunning golden net and sets a trap. And when he catches the lovers in the act, he takes them to Mount Olympus and shames and humiliates them in front of all the other gods. So I decided it would be fun to set that scene in a Manhattan hotel room in 1942. And instead of taking the cheaters to Mount Olympus, I have Hephaestus put them on trial right there, particularly Aphrodite, his wife, on trial for infidelity there in the hotel room. And so, of course, Aphrodite is more than he bargained for. I think more than all of us bargained for. I'm kind of irked by how often she's portrayed in literature as shallow and brainless and insubstantial. But this Aphrodite really fights back and takes charge of the situation. And she pleads her defense by telling these 2 love stories. One of a young British couple that meets in the final year of the war and falls in love, and music is a big part of that. And another is a couple, an interracial couple, made up of an African-American soldier from the Harlem Hellfighters Regiment in the segregated U.S. Army that faced incredible hostility from within the United States and within the U.S. military, including violence and lynchings, just because they wanted to serve as soldiers. And the other partner is a Belgian refugee, a young woman who's lost her family to the German invasion of Belgium in the first months of the war. So these 4 characters allow me to look at what life was like for women and how women's lives changed because of the war, how the war was instrumental in them receiving the right to vote, for example. What life was like for soldiers in the trenches, what life was like in the United States around the turn of the century, and what segregation and racial violence did throughout the country, the role of ragtime music and the jazz age and all of the popular American music that would follow from ragtime, as well as the impact of war psychologically and on communities and on families, on civilian life, how war affects communities. So there's a lot going on, but it is, at the end of the day, it is a story told by Aphrodite, the goddess of love, so it is very passionate and romantic, and I hope you'll fall in love with these characters as I have.
All your books draw on historical research and contemporary research. And I was curious, for each of you, where do you start with your research, and then how do you weave it in with the actual storytelling?
So I had to research World War I a ton because I didn't know a whole lot about it going into it, which was part of why I wanted to write about World War I, because I feel like we have so many books about World War II and hardly any about World War I, especially for teens. And I thought, well, why is that? Why don't we talk about it more? And I realized because it's very confusing. It's just not as clean-cut of a story as we think World War II is. Although in my research I realized actually World War II is not so clear-cut either. And especially in terms of the moral right and wrong of it, right? Like it's very easy to reduce it down and just to be really clear, just to be like abundantly clear. you know, the Third Reich and the Axis powers and the Holocaust were, you know, moral outrages that had to be stopped. But it's easy to, for example, overlook like American complicity with a lot of what was going on up until the war started. I guess, okay, this is like way darker than I meant to be. So I just realized there was a lot that I knew next to nothing about World War I. Had to do a deep dive, just do a ton of reading just to be able to even figure out how to explain to someone how it started. And the bar fight analogy is actually a really good one, if you know the one I mean. So then, as I researched the war, I found certain aspects of it that really spoke to me. I was especially interested in the social interactions that World War I created and how it affected life for civilians, for women, for minorities. One of the things that was going on in my life, and it's kind of funny, I was living apart from my husband for a year, not for marital reasons, but because of the health needs of one of our children. We just needed to be apart because of job and health matters. And I missed him terribly. And I got the piano in the divorce. And so I found myself playing piano like obsessively, and I kind of thought of it as my coping mechanism for missing my husband. So I kind of referred to the piano as my husband, kind of jokingly. And during that year, I went and got, I wanted to challenge myself with some new music. And I, you know, played as a kid, not great, didn't play much as an adult. And then somehow in this year, my heart just went to the piano. And so I went to a music store and I got Maple Leaf Rag by Scott Joplin, just for a challenging, fun piece to learn. And so I'm, you know, painstakingly trying to teach myself Maple Leaf Rag, and then I'm researching, and all roads kept leading me back to the Harlem Hellfighters. And I kept thinking, you know, is this even my story to tell? And then I thought, well, I don't see anyone else writing a story about World War I and mythology, so like, okay, I guess I'll just do it. And so as I researched the Hellfighters and realized the role that ragtime played in the war and in how the war helped to spread and popularize that music around the world, it just felt like, it was just one of those tingly moments, right, that you have as writers. We're like, well then why did I start playing piano all of a sudden? And why did I pick out Maple Leaf Rag? And it all just felt meant to be. So I challenged myself that I would learn a handful of ragtime pieces and be ready to take them on tour when the book came out. And that was a super hard stretch for me. Like, I am a mediocre musician at best. And so I worked.
Where is your piano?
Yeah. I know, I'm ready for it.
Like right now.
So like I worked like a demon to get those songs ready, and it was terrifying because I'm very comfortable speaking in public. I don't even mind singing in public, but playing piano, oh my gosh, I would stiffen up and freeze. But I decided, you know, I'm 40-something years old, and it's time I conquered a new fear. So I did it. And I felt like it was kind of research. As I was trying to write about these ragtime pianists, I was trying to be a ragtime pianist. So I think of it as like method authoring. I was becoming, you know, Daniel Day-Lewis or whatever.
Maybe they'll let me be a princess for a day. That can be my method authoring.
So this panel is technically specifically about YA, and is YA for everyone, which I can answer that yes. We all, as an adult reader of YA, woo. But I'm curious for you guys, how did you get started writing YA, and what keeps you in that age range?
You know, when I was a kid, I don't really remember there being much of YA literature. At least I don't remember that designation existing as such. And if I think about my small town library, there was a beautiful children's section, and then there was the adult stuff. There wasn't much connecting it. There wasn't a teen section anywhere to be found, except there was sort of a back wall that ran the space between the children's section and the adult section. And I remember that on that back wall, I found Robin McKinley. And I remember how she just blew my little mind. And when I read Beauty by Robin McKinley, I think I was about 12 years old, and I can still find the pages in my journal. They're so embarrassing. It's like, I just read the most beautiful, like really original for the book called Beauty. You know, like it just went nuts over Robin McKinley, and then I read all her other books. But I don't remember there being much else. You know, there was a lot of stuff that did not interest me. There was kind of like Sweet Valley High, bleh, you know, and I just like immediately knew that was, and maybe I didn't give it a fair chance, and I don't, like, I never even read it. So if you love it, it's great, we can be friends. But the cover of it did not speak to me at all. So in a way, I'm writing for the kid that I was, that didn't have a body of literature for her. And it's great to be part of this moment in time when there's so much great YA coming out. And as Catherine says, it's so very differentiated. There's a flavor for everybody, and it's stylish and it's fun, and it's great that so many adults are reading it too. Kind of like you shared, there's an element of hope that appeals to you. I find that when I write YA, whether I'm writing for teens or for people of any age who are drawn to YA, I feel as though I'm writing for an audience that's listening and that's willing to be impacted and that's willing to be perhaps inspired. And I don't feel that sort of sense of jadedness that I can find sometimes in adult literature. And I don't mean to say it's all there. Obviously there's, luminous gems of beauty and there in the other building. But I do feel like writing for YA gives me that freedom to possibly make a difference. And, I think YA is a genre about young people on the brink, whether they're on the brink of bright futures or whether they're on the brink of really hard lives. And I think that's what drew me to writing about war in this case, because I feel like the young people of these war generations, really didn't know if they'd be here tomorrow, and how that sharpens your appreciation for today. That meant a lot to me. So,
Wonderful answer. I'm curious to hear about your process for writing each of your books and how they came into fruition from your head to the page.
So the process looks like a woman in her pajamas for weeks on end, in my case, and a pile of cereal bowls over here. I don't really know how else, I mean, it's kind of, for me, it's a tandem process of researching and writing. So research first, then start writing, and then you start writing and realize, oh shoot, like all that research I did, I still don't know, 2/3 of what I need to know. Oh crud, so now I gotta get more books, and but meanwhile, by now you're late, on the darn thing, and people are mad at you. So you gotta just surge forward and scramble to find the answers you need as you go, and hope that none of the answers that you find, knock over the whole premise of your book. So far that hasn't happened. I did hear, wasn't there a thing on NPR recently about a big deal author whose entire premise was based on a misunderstanding of a fundamental research fact, and she learned on the brink of the release of her book that the whole thing, they should just be burned because they're wrong. It's
Oh, that's when you make it a fantasy, I guess. I don't know who you're talking about. I mean, I just imagine getting the next thing.
Horrible stuff, right? I'm just like, oh goodness, that's not yet. So, I know it doesn't quite feel like an answer, except it's just, man, it's like being in school and having that paper that's due. You just have to cram it out somehow. But it's a really long paper. So I think the reality is that other than the problem of, we're all getting older, right? We're all growing in some way. Children have to deal with parents, but so much of what adults face that makes life hard for them. Children are not immune. Children are not immune to things like grief and loss. Teens are certainly exposed at a much too early age to things that we wish they weren't. So it's hard for me to say what's a uniquely youthful problem versus a uniquely adult problem, because I think in all of these books we're dealing with the loss of innocence, whether that's sometimes the loss of innocence is right on schedule. It's supposed to happen. I think that term is actually a little too charged. It sounds moralistic, and I don't ascribe to that. But for example, when I was writing Lovely War, I was concerned because I felt like I was trying to figure out how to have characters enter the war as young people, but I knew that they would leave the war as kind of emotionally shattered adults, and I didn't know how to keep a World War I story YA. And part of how I did that was by confining the duration of the story to the last year of the war, so that I could have people enter the war in its final year. But also part of it was just realizing, well, of course they're going to become adults. Of course they're going to lose some of their youthfulness in the process of these experiences, and all young people lose some of their youthfulness in the things that life presents them with. So I had to just kind of be okay with that. I'm not sure if I'm exactly answering your question, but I guess what I mean to say is I think that the problems that young people face are very analogous to the problems that adults face. And I wish that were not, I wish that there weren't refugee children who have to face the things that they have to face, or victims of abuse. I wish that we didn't have a world that thrusts such problems on the young way too soon. But that is the world we live in, and so that's the world I write about.
Thank you, Julie, Catherine, and Peter, for a fantastic conversation. Thank you guys for being a great audience. Our author